Broadcast Podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Nicholas Smith, coming at you live or pseudo-live, depending on when you're watching the delayed feed from Folsom, California. Not in the jail, but near it. With me in studio today is Mr. Jordan Friday running the boards, all three of them, or two of them, remotely with two hands. He's really impressive. You got to see him. And, all right, this is a fun one. So we've got a couple of guests today on the show. It's the two Georges from Epiphan. Gentlemen, introduce yourselves. Tell us what you do, why you do it, and where you're at.
You go first.
We'll start with the bearded George.
Well, yeah, we'll start. Okay, my name is George Herbert, and I head our customer success team here at Epiphan. So dealing with all of our customers, both high and low and everything in between. So it's front lines. That's what I do all day is talk to customers, and it's the best part of the job.
Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm the other George. I'm other George, known as at the company, because I'm the second George of the company. And like George, I'm in Ottawa, Canada, and I head up the marketing team with the company. So I'm always interested in hearing what customers think about us and what they think about the industry. So it's nice to get a chance to talk to my buddy George here, and also to talk to you, Nick, because I'm sure you've got some stories that you can share with us today.
I hope so. Today is story time. That's really what this is. This is story time with
for sure
with us. We love story time. Okay, so let's start with the story. Who is Epiphan? I mean, for somebody who's coming in fresh, what do you guys do? What's your core concept?
Sure.
Bearded George.
George, you want me to take that?
Well, no, actually, we're gonna put gonna put the other George on see, because bald George, you're in marketing, so you're supposed to.
Bald George. That's what my kids call me. Okay. Yeah, we're Epiphan Video. We've been in business for about 18 years, which is a long time for a technology company, but we started out making capture equipment originally used in places like space. So on the ISS right now, we have devices used to capture video in really mission critical applications like underwater things and industrial places where they're wind tunnels and all these things. George knows all these stories. He's talked to everybody. But now what we're really focused on are people trying to do broadcasting of some kind or another. So we use the slogan, broadcast without borders, without barriers. Forgive me. I make that mistake all the time. Broadcast without barriers. Works for both, yeah. The idea is that we want to make equipment that allows anybody to make their broadcast work. So sometimes that is a lecture in a school. Sometimes it is a really highfalutin live event that you're trying to make with lots of bells and whistles. But in any case, you just want to get your message out to the world. So we make a lot of hardware that's really easy to use and has big touch screens on it. It's very intuitive. And foremost above anything else, George, you can attest to this, it's reliable. So people trust it because it just works. It's for live streaming.
Part of that is our goal as part of that without barriers is let's try to remove the traditional barriers that have made it difficult for people to achieve broadcast quality video for live streaming and recording, right? That's our mission. It's really the company focus across the board.
And kind of like when you talk about the barriers, to me, it's always been the user interface and the equipment, right? It's Absolutely. If we go back pre-Epiphan, I mean, you would require racks of gear to solve the problems you're doing in a single box.
You still do now. When you look at the things that people are using before they come to us, they've got, 16 different pieces of equipment to do what they can do now with a single appliance. So yeah, it's come a long way.
Yeah. It's amazing. In my previous life, I designed and integrated studios and broadcast facilities for city councils, churches, all that kind of stuff. And I remember going in to do, customers would have racks of gear and we'd compress it down to one rack, right? And now we're taking that same rack and we're compressing it down to one RU of, technology to solve the same problems. And that's inherently technology moves, right? It's what it does, right? It constantly grows,
Definitely.
And migrates and shapes and changes. And what keeps us all employed. Because we constantly got to tell new stories about how to do it.
It's exciting. Yeah.
No, it's great.
Well, I mean, fun history time, Nick, you mentioned your past there. It's for us, around about 2014, I guess. So, feels like yesterday, but it's also quite a while ago. We sought out to solve that problem of these people with racks and racks of gear. And how do we condense that down into a single appliance? And also, how do we make that so easy to use that anybody can use it and anyone can do it, including, you mentioned churches, right? That's a big customer base for Epiphan because they're relying on low-level users that are sometimes volunteers who don't have broadcast training. They don't often know what they're doing with this stuff. Let's make it as easy for that person to deliver high-quality content And so the original Pearl was born kind of out of that idea. How do we condense it down and make it so easy that anyone can do it? Because we've all been there. If it's not easy, you won't use it. But if it's easy, you'll use it 1,000 times a day. So that's, of course, that's grown into the current Pearl line, which obviously we could dive more into.
Well, it's interesting. So just to grab something the other George said a second ago, it's broadcast without borders, right? And then if I look at where you've evolved, who the broadcaster is completely changed, right?
Absolutely.
Whenever I say the word broadcaster, people immediately think, well, CBS, NBC, Fox, whatever, they always think of the top level broadcasters, but your product's, granted, if they want to use it, great. You're really not developing that product for them. It's everybody else who is now a broadcaster, right? It's
and
your local
everybody
YouTuber.
is a broadcaster.
Yeah, everybody's a broadcaster.
Out of the woodwork.
Exactly.
Like our colleague Julian took the day off on Friday, and you know where he was? We got to see where he was because it was being broadcast. He was at a dog show, like showing his show dog, and it was on some Fox affiliate. I don't know what it was, some internet version of Fox.
I think it was like, FS8, right, or FS9. It was.
In Canada, that is Greek, but.
It's always been a joke. All these companies have multiple channels, right? And it's
exactly.
It's like, which version of the channel? Number 8, number 9? I don't know. But yeah, you're right. But here he is in a remote location on a traditional broadcast doing a broadcast for you all.
Yeah.
Right. But as we just mentioned, that could be a church, it could be a school, it could be a city council. And I certainly think that the past 2.5 years have really changed that significantly due to, circumstances that caused a lot of industries and a lot of people to try to find new ways to pivot to deliver their messaging. They also found out how easy it is to make really high quality content and become a broadcaster. And so, again, you mentioned city councils. It's one of my favorite ones because I've talked to a lot of them recently. And one of the biggest things is they can deliver that messaging themselves now. They don't have to rely on traditional media like we just talked about to deliver that content that we as citizens, either locally, globally, or whatever, we need that information. And, again, it's all about removing those barriers, right? Tearing that down and making sure that's there. We've sometimes joked internally. I think it's even mentioned in one of our promo videos, and in some ways led to this idea of broadcast without barriers. And that's the democratization of video kind of idea, right? Like that's where we're at in 2022, where video is open, anyone can do it. So why not?
Yeah, there's that whole direct-to-consumer model, right? And we looked at the sort of, down in the U.S., the cable providers who, it's like the only way to get HBO was to go to my local Comcast. And then I signed up for HBO. And then we started to see all those companies go, yeah, maybe we just go direct to the consumer because they all have streaming devices. Well, that same mentality has sort of come across every other market vertical, right? My local city council doesn't have to go to their local Comcast to get the message out. They still do, but they also go straight to their YouTube, straight to their Facebook,
exactly.
Right? And there's just all these pathways now to communicate with mass appeal, with a mass, audience without having to deal with the middleman. But the same token is always true. Bad content is not watchable. Good content is very watchable. So how do we evolve the content to be good other than to use good tools, right? To use tools that allow you to tell a better story.
We try to say make the tool something you don't have to think about. Just get rid of that, abstract that completely so they can just show up and think about content. And we want to hide the tools. We want to make it so they don't know what's happening at all. It's completely abstracted.
Well, and I think this is one of your strong value points that you mentioned earlier is it's the UI, the user interface, the user experience that matters most. You can have the best solution in the world, but if the UI, if the experience for the user is rough, they're never going to use it. Right? They're just going to struggle with it. And so, and like you mentioned, even in the house of worship, and this is the same true in city council. We saw so many, it's the clerk sitting in the dais that's really the one turning the stream on and off. They're not video professionals, right? They're city managers. They're managing a zoo right now, and it's like the experience for them has to be very simple of what do I want my audience to see right now? Right. And be able to use that very, very easily.
Well, George, we have an amazing use case about that. It's actually published on the website in the Hawaii State Senate using Epiphan Pearl 2. And they went that route for exactly that reason. They don't have a broadcast team.
They don't have a Jordan like in the background.
Everybody needs a
pulling all the
Jordan,
strings,
but you can't have mine. That's all there's to it. You can all get your own.
exactly.
Get your own
Everybody
Jordan.
wants your Jordan. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, that's true.
But they're hard.
But that case study is a wonderful example of, it's one that we got written up and published, but it's not unique by any stretch, and it's a fabulous one to look at. So if anyone's ever curious, obviously check out epiphan.com and look at the case studies there. We always publish as many as we can and as detailed as we can.
Here's
to make sure
I've always
that
wanted to say. Check the show notes for the link to that particular case study. Can we get that in the show notes, Jordan? Yeah, it's good. It's perfect.
Well, it also points out, like,
Such
to your
power.
dealers, how many municipalities are within 100, let's say, miles of your dealers, right?
Yeah.
And every one of them is trying to figure out how to stream or how to improve what they've already got. Maybe they got something in place that's old and clunky and they're trying to fix it, or they're not doing it at all. So there's a
There are 300,000 cities in North America that need to tell their message, need their audiences to see what's going on. So there's so many opportunities for this. I mean, could you imagine if every one of them had a Pearl?
Exactly.
Well, and we're trying, but it's the other part of that is and George actually found this a statistic that we bring up in some of our meetings sometimes, is that it was something like a study from a couple of years ago. It was like 55% of corporate enterprises use video in some capacity internally for messaging, right? And like, I love that stat for a couple of reasons. One, on the surface, you go 55%. That's I mean, how many companies are there? That's an impressive number. But then you flip that around, you go, wait a second, that means there's 45% that aren't doing it that should be.
Yeah. And it's something we see a lot with some of these larger corporations, especially ones that have hundreds of offices or storefronts.
Yeah.
How do they maintain training material? How do they get out new messages? If I'm Starbucks and there's a new, product, how do we get the message out on how to build that product? Right. And how to mix it? Well, video is the best way to communicate this. Right. And, so therein lies the problem. Now let's pivot for a second, because, you mentioned 55%, and I'm sure that was probably pre-pandemic, and I'm betting that's gone way up since
probably
the pandemic. But now that I've mentioned that, who shall not be named, it opened up an interesting segment. And I think you guys, from a technology standpoint, are embracing this, which is, I don't have to be in the room, i.e. you all up north and me down south, to have a conversation to create content, right? And so talk to me about some of the tools you're now developing and releasing that are about remote production and remote workflows, on that side, because that's obviously a big thing on everybody's mind, is how do I produce it when we're all over the world?
Yeah, George, you want to dive into that for a second?
Well, it starts with having something good on the edge. So in the room, to be able to capture video well, very straightforward. And we've been doing that for many years. So that's been our bread and butter, devices like this I'm holding up. But where it gets interesting is when you want to have, my feed and George's feed and your feed, Nick. And often the best way to manage those tools is from the cloud itself. Because there's no point in bringing all this video up into the cloud and then back down into another piece of local hardware and then pushing that back up into the cloud. It's a lot clunkier of a workflow. So an area that we've really been focusing on is cloud production and cloud device management. So everything we sell from a piece of hardware perspective, you can manage it from the cloud. You can go in and check all those camera feeds, make sure they're good, make sure all your streaming and recording and everything's working just as it should. But you can also use a product that we've just released called Unify to actually produce that content in the cloud. So a production just like we're watching here today, I can't really see the final output. I'm assuming it looks beautiful, and you've got nice layouts and you're doing switching and all of these nice things. You can do all of that from the cloud using Epiphan Unify. So we're pretty excited about that. That's very new. We're just getting our feet wet. George is probably getting calls from customers about this all the time, trying to say, how do I actually make this work? But that's an area of focus for our business, because it's just a perfect fit. Like, do your production in the cloud, do some of your edge encoding, and it makes your life a little bit easier.
And that's a really important facet, because there's always this concept of, we're going to do it in the cloud, right? Everything starts on-prem, regardless if it's in the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. There's always a beginning and an endpoint, and typically they're on-prem. So the fact that you're sort of offering that hybrid workflow concept of, hey, look, garbage in, garbage out, right? We want the best quality video coming in, use our encoder to get it into the cloud. Then once it's in there, manipulate it. And honestly, just tell better stories by having access to more storytellers.
Yeah, because we
Well,
wouldn't be here today, right? Like I love you and all, Nick, but I'm not going to fly down there
Yeah.
for a podcast.
No, no,
right.
no. I know,
But
Jordan.
that,
Don't
Maybe
take
for
offense,
I know,
Jordan.
Jordan
blown
after,
away,
maybe.
blown away.
Yeah,
Just
no,
absolutely
totally.
crushed all the hopes and
Yeah,
dreams that Jordan
no,
had.
he's
But
like, we're not
no,
that
but
important. But
it is
but
exactly
that's
that, though,
but
right?
the cost of that, right? There's
That's it.
a reason you wouldn't. If it was super valuable, we would probably find a way, right? And we would say, okay, but what's the cost of a plane, the hotel, the time out of your life? How many stories have not been told because of that, right?
Mhm.
And now we can say, well, now we
That's
can tell those stories again, right? We can get back
exactly.
to, yeah,
That's the
producing.
lesson I think of the past couple years, right? Is that people were forced to do things remotely, and some did it well, some did it very poorly, to your point, Nick, of garbage in, garbage out, right? And we saw lots of examples of that early on in 2020 where, it was just, hey, I'm going to take a Zoom gallery and crop some stuff out remotely. And it looked awful. It sounded
Right.
awful because no one had good setups in their home. We hadn't educated people about cameras and audio and all these pieces. And we at Epiphan were sitting there going, hey, right from day one, we were producing spectacular quality webinars because we were using our own hardware right from the beginning and finding ways to do it hybrid and then educating our customers on how to do that and seeing them be incredibly successful in that. And now it's just growing and growing and adding new tools to make it better. And yeah, you're right. Let's teach people about a good quality camera and good quality audio into a good quality encoder, even if ultimately in the back end you're, using some lower grade method of real-time communication, get your master feeds super high quality and get those somewhere so that your Jordans of the world have the best possible content to work with.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because a couple pieces that I think are sort of ancillary to the whole REMI workflow concept, right? Which is, okay, we can do it. And people that I went to 3 years ago and said, let's move some things to the cloud, they go, no way, never. Right. And now I come back to them, they're like, oh, we've been in the cloud for 2 years and it's really quite nice. Thank you. And so there's that evolution. The other one that I think is really, and this is very fringe of the whole conversation, is network infrastructure, right? I mean, we've all been like, oh, I can get broadband to my house. Cool. I'm getting 50. And then suddenly, ooh, 300 sounds really good. Can I get gig to my house? Right. But there hasn't really been a need. And I've watched the prices on internet start to come down and the speeds start to go up because more people are home demanding it, which is sort of saying, okay, well, we have to build out a better infrastructure. And this is good for us because it's now, where I was talking to a guy at NFL at, sort of early in the work from home era. And he was like, yeah, I mean, my internet wasn't fast enough because my kids were watching TV too much and I had to bring in a new line. Right. And it was like people saw the value and the importance of a faster internet connection. But at the same, so we've got the infrastructure being better developed to allow us to broadcast from anywhere. But at the same token, we're also developing better codecs and better video infrastructure. So you guys are doing a lot with SRT right now. Right.
Yes.
And there's a reason, because it is really designed and purpose built for REMI. Right. And for those of you who don't understand, REMI production is remote interview. Right. And there are things like NDI that are great for in-premise, for on-prem.
Yes.
But once you leave that firewall, you need something that's kind of purpose built for connecting two locations and making good quality video between those two locations.
Yeah, and SRT is exactly that. And Nick, you might have just set me up for the perfect segue with no scripted planning, which is excellent. But because you mentioned the NFL, in the early days of the pandemic, during the NFL draft, they had to figure out how to connect things. They used SRT. They used like 600 different SRT streams, including sending little mobile kits to cheerleaders in their homes so that they could participate in this gigantic NFL scale production, which viewers probably didn't care the fact that it wasn't in person anymore, right? Because of the grand scale of it was still there and the quality was still there. And so they made this amazing thing. And of course, that's now gone into all these other areas of what do we do? So on top of that, we've also worked, you mentioned codecs. Our Pearl Nano recently was updated to also use H.265, HEVC, so that if we are in a place where maybe we need 4K streams, but our bandwidth is limited, something like Pearl Nano with HEVC means we can cut our bandwidth requirements in half and still get incredible quality content out of it. So, all of that is moving forward. In terms of internet getting better and cheaper, I think George and I will just cry in Canadian up here, where that's not necessarily the case.
Sorry.
Canadian will also cry about, like, when you go to these trade shows like Infocom, where we were trying to stream in 4K from our little trade show booth. We wanted to make it look great, and we did. And the only way we could do it was through H.265, because we get half the bandwidth, and SRT, because they charge you an astronomical amount of money for their internet costs. There's gatekeepers in place. The Canadian government and the whole. Those are two.
And the hotels and the trade show. Yeah,
exactly.
We've in the past brought in our own cellular connections, and then but then and everybody started doing it now that the local antennas are overloaded, and you're like, there's just no way. That's the one problem with trade shows is everybody's trying to showcase.
Well, any densely populated place, like when exciting things are happening. We tried, remember last year? No, was it last year? 2 years ago, Canada Day is coming up on July 1st. We're like, great, let's go downtown and live stream the fireworks. Well, guess what? Like, everybody and their sister and their mom and their brother is also trying to live stream from their phone at the same time. So it's just like, okay, that was a dumb idea.
Facebook,
we need to do a really boring
TikToks,
event.
All of it happening. Yeah,
exactly.
No, I mean, but that is the democratization of video, right?
Yes,
and that's the beautiful part about it is now everybody can communicate. Everybody can broadcast. So let's pivot for a little second, because I mean, you've got all these new sort of tools that are developing for people to produce content. There's another piece to the story, which is, the systems integrators, the dealers that are saying, okay, I have client X and they have problem B. What should I solve here? I'm going to solve for E, for Epiphan. So, as we bring that together, it's like, what are the tools that you all have to support these dealers? And why would somebody like, an integrator want to put this in over maybe a Tron, right? Like an Extron or a Crestron?
Well, I think coming back to what we said before is that our objective is to try to simplify, right? And condense things into one appliance as much as possible, not only for simplification for the user's sake, but also so that we don't have racks and racks of gear, right? And that's important. The other thing is, Epiphan has stock right now. I think that's pretty important to dealers. We have stuff on the shelf ready to sell and ready to integrate tomorrow. So if you are bumping into supply chain issues, which everyone is in some capacity these days, right. It's inevitable. Go try and buy a car. Like, it's possible.
You can have it, you just don't get the in-dash experience.
Exactly. Or you go try and buy a used one for the same price as new. It makes no sense. That's a big thing for us, is that we have that option right now, and we have the stock. We can get that there. And in many cases, a single Pearl can replace multiple pieces of equipment. And that's important. And even more so is that in the Epiphan Pearl line, there's 3 models, which means there's a Pearl for everyone, depending on the scale of the operation. I mentioned Pearl Nano before. That's the entry level, small, compact. I'll try to pull a George Birchall here and grab mine. Oh yeah, there we go. We could play with it. Yeah.
I'll show you yours if you show me mine.
Exactly. But it's that perfect fit for maybe a remote contribution encoder that's really simple and easy to use, or maybe you have an existing signal chain with all the fancy bells and whistles and switches. You just need a bulletproof encoder for SRT and HEVC. Nano's the ticket. Maybe you need to go a little more production, right? George keeps holding up his Pearl Mini that he has. That's going to add a little bit more production tools to it, but still very simple and straightforward, and is an amazing fit for the education market, which of course that's coming imminently. Like, we're all into summer and thinking vacations, but that just means that the new school year is around the corner. And then of course the top end, we have Pearl 2, which is...
it's interesting though, as you're kind of stopping right there, because in the system integrator world, when we walk around Infocom, everybody now is embedded some kind of streaming into their device. Oh, my device now streams. My device streams. My device streams. Like, added streaming. It was sort of like NAB from a few years ago when they scratched out the 3D on the sign and they replaced 3D with 4K. That's sort of the same, And so it's like, just because you can doesn't mean it's right, to do something. And as I look at everybody's sort of like, oh, we can stream. It's like, okay, but what? Right. And when we get into streaming, it's like the content matters. And if I only have the ability to stream one source, right, I might not be telling the whole story. And with the Epiphan series, or the Pearl series, I can add two sources together. I can composite two images together. I can do
And you can bring in
overlays.
your audio.
I
Is
can
a
bring
big
in
one too. Because
audio.
if you can't send great audio from a mixing board, usually is where you want your audio coming, not like embedded in a little camera or something, right? So
Right. Yeah, it's about getting that good content in. So even if you're building an AV infrastructure and the client goes, I want to have streaming, it's like, okay, well, just because that product over there can say, oh, I can stream a source to YouTube, probably still means you want to look at the right streaming encoder. You want the right box
Absolutely.
to solve that piece, right? And because you have these different price points, they can, oh, maybe all we need is a nano to solve this problem versus going to the full Pearl on the other side.
But people also use them like Swiss Army knives too. In the live event space, they keep them on the shelf and they're like, oh, send a Pearl because it can record all the ISOs. That's all it's doing today. Next day, they're sending out a Pearl. Oh, we just need a streamer to stick on the end of some other vMix computer that's overloaded that they can't do it. So people use them for weird little functions that, George, you hear about a lot more than I do. We imagine they're always using them for like capturing, recording, streaming at the same time. But a lot of people just use it for one thing because that does them all really well, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. It is all over the place, and that's, listen, there's a lot of great products on the market, right? No one's going to deny that. There's a lot of great stuff out there. The question is what stands out, right? So Nick, you have that Pearl Nano in front of you, right? It's like there's a lot of really cool products in that more entry-level hardware encoder space today, which is awesome. But one thing that, to George's point, the Nano has full professional XLR audio on the back of it. There's not too many other devices in that class that come close to that in terms of audio support. And that's important for us because ultimately Pearls for us are a professional grade device. Even though we're trying to make it as easy as possible so that hopefully grandma can use it in her church, we also want to make sure that we're getting the professional audio out of the mixer board in that church so that it sounds amazing to anyone watching that live stream, right? Like that's the big objective. That's the goal. And that just scales up, right? As we go into things like Pearl Mini, let's put it in a classroom where maybe they were trying to just do it off of the professor's laptop before with some software and the audio sounded bad and they're using a webcam and, well, no, let's use SDI based cameras. Let's use professional audio and make sure that we're not in a scenario of garbage in, garbage out, that we're getting amazing in and amazing out.
Yeah,
some things can't be fixed in post.
Exactly.
People come to us after they've tried something else. They're like, oh, I figured it out. I got a computer and a capture card, is fine. Or I got some little streaming encoder, is fine. And then
OBS is free.
OBS is free, or vMix is crazy powerful. And I love vMix. It's awesome. But they go, oh, I just want something I can put in a room that works that I can teach somebody to use in the morning.
Well, there's an interesting layer of that.
We're the rebound.
Well, and not just that, like from a systems integrator side, if I'm putting this in a conference room, nobody's going to want to figure out how to use OBS or vMix, right? No. Your average person walking into the conference room and says, hey, look, we're holding a meeting. I've got everybody here in my presentation. I want that to go out to the masses. They can't light up vMix and try and figure all that out.
Even the live eventers don't want to use vMix. I mean, they do because it's wonderful, but it's such a big ask for training and for like a person to come in and get good at vMix or something like that. Like, whew.
Well, but if I want to walk into a conference room and I've got a Crestron or let's say a QSys system running my conference room, it turns my projector on, it fires up everything. And if all I want to do is stream, I want to go to that same interface and just hit the stream button. And the APIs here inside of the Pearl series allow that, right? Absolutely. So, oftentimes we've talked about your interface and how easy it is to use, but it's not just your interface. It's you have a full API structure here that allow third-party products to control the first party one here, right? And that's very important from a dealer integrator standpoint of saying, hey, other APIs, is there ability to turn on the encoder, switch layouts, right? All that's there.
Mm-hmm. There's also a reliability element to it too, right? I mean, when we're dealing with dedicated hardware appliances like the Pearls, right? We're adding an element of reliability, right? We're not talking about a PC with a bunch of dongles hanging off of it, hoping that Windows doesn't screw up in the middle of our production and do an update, right? Like it only takes that to happen once before you're ready to just throw that out the window, right? And when you start dealing with dedicated hardware built to task, doesn't have that extra bloat and overhead bogging it down, means you're going to do more, it's going to run better, and you don't have to worry about it. And so as an integrator, if that was me, that's all I would want, because ultimately you're going to get the phone call, right? And ideally you don't get the phone call. And that's really what we all want, right? Is that ideally the solution is so good and so bulletproof and so easy to use that we're not just spending our life answering problem phone calls.
Yeah, no, and Jordan just brought up something really interesting. Was there's a case study. Let's put this one in the show notes too, Jordan, or a link to it. That we were showcasing sort of remote lecture capture recording to a cloud platform where then people can, and it was built around Pearls and Vimeo, right? So we stream out of the Pearl, do multicam switching, and then send that up to Vimeo, where then a teacher can remotely log in and watch that after the fact, grade it, add notes, and push that back down inside kind of that. All these alternative use cases, so to speak, right? Then what we sort of think is traditional broadcast. Some people just need to record video for later usage.
And if you're a school, you might need to record 300 rooms of video. So there's a lot of opportunity there as well. Like you can sell into a school. It's like a city.
Well,
absolutely. And that kind of comes back to sort of your, because we talked about like third-party control, first-party control from you all. You have that cloud base where you can see all your encoders, manage them, sort of, talk a little bit about how that one sort of supports both the channel and the end user.
Yeah. So Epiphan Cloud is your dashboard, your home base for everything Pearl, right? And we do have schools as customers that have upwards of 500 Pearls deployed across their campuses. And it's made so much easier for their administration team, for the IT team or the AV team. It's hard to say because those worlds are blurring. But they can just go into cloud. They can see the status of everything online, offline, signals plugged in, audio levels, right? They could do full remote administration as though they're sitting beside the box through the cloud if they need to, which means that maybe that person's not local that day. They're on the road for some reason and they need to look at something. Cloud tools allow us to do that. And as fleets get big, that's pretty critical. And then it starts to spill into, okay, well, now we can start doing remote production as well, because we start seeing schools build out dedicated studio spaces now, right? It's not just the classroom anymore. Now it's little closet studios for faculty and students to use to create content, right? Like that's huge these days, absolutely huge. So being able to manage all of those.
That Penn State one button studio concept, right? That they put out, but which was a bunch of third-party disparate manufacturers.
Exactly. And like you said, put it in, manage it with an API locally, but then at a higher level, if there's something more than that, through cloud tools, we can do all of the more intimate details, if you will. So that's pretty important.
So guys, we're coming close to the end of the time, and I want to ask one last thing. So with the new cloud products that are releasing, right? The sort of the REMI workflow tools. How do people test them, play with them, get to know them better? What are you doing for them?
That one's pretty straightforward. Come to our website and you won't miss it. Go to epiphan.com. You'll see a sign-up opportunity for Unify, where you'll get a call from somebody and they will set you up with an account. Actually, I don't even think they call you anymore. They're just going to set you up with an account and you can go in there and try bringing in SRT streams and connecting them together and doing broadcasting all from the cloud. So I encourage anybody to sign up. We're really looking for feedback on this too. This is new for us as well. So we'd value any, especially dealers, because dealers know quite a lot about this space.
Yeah. The next layer of that is Connect, which will be coming a little while after. So there's some stuff on the website now about it. So while you're there signing up for Unify, check out the Connect stuff as well. And that's going to be very exciting for those people who leverage Microsoft Teams and are looking for remote production elements to improve how they might do that at a distance. And of course, we're going to have a lot more information on that coming throughout the summer. And we'll be ramping up into a beta open phase there, hopefully very shortly as well. So lots of tools coming in the cloud to make it exciting. And then, of course,
we'll definitely get ourselves signed up for that one. Those sound like ones that we need to be testing internally. Yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, look, this is awesome. For more details, go to epiphan.com or reach out to us at exertisbroadcast.com. We can get you guys, everybody linked up. Obviously, both teams have engineers like ourselves available so that we can help walk people through the products, the services, and just get a better understanding of how Epiphan sort of is breaking the borders of video production.
Exactly.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate having you both. This has been another episode of the Exertis Broadcast Podcast. We're here often. I won't say every day, but we're here often. So stay tuned for the next episode. And I thank you both again for being on the show.
Thanks very much.